And Warm Trophy Kids presented by Bad News Media. It is the college football week 9 betting preview show. As always, I am your host, Nate. Look, folks, this is an interesting week. We didn't have our best week last week. We still are 25-18, a winning season as of right now in college football. NFL podcast came out earlier today. Make sure you check that out. Got a nice double win on Thursday night. Got some good games there. We break down every game like every week. Gonna have some good bets. I feel pretty good about the card this week, so make sure to check out the NFL show. If you aren't already subscribed, make sure to subscribe, like Trophy Kids podcast, both on our Instagram and Twitter page, as well as TikTok now. We're going to go over some big time games this week, but it's been a little bit of a chaotic week. I haven't finalized all my bets, so I've got a couple for you today on the show, but we'll have more on the social media pages. So as always, it makes sense to be following those for the most up-to-date bets. Make sure you're getting all of our good information here. But we got some interesting games, and we're going to start with Kansas, Oklahoma. The line set at 9.5, over under 66. Kansas scheduling just a brutal game for their homecoming. Oklahoma rolls into this game. They're one of my top tier teams in college football. Everybody sort of, I think, has their own opinion on Oklahoma right now. Brent Venables has done a great job of kind of making sure that this program didn't have, a bleed off once Lincoln Riley left. The defense has kind of solidified itself as a really solid unit that continues to get better week in and week out. And the offense has been rolling pretty well. I think we're getting to a point, though, where it maybe might make sense to start to short this team a little bit. We seem to be getting to a high point in the market. Kansas has presented an interesting challenge because we don't really know where Daniels is at in his recovery. He's got the back issue that seems to be flaring up from here and there, and we don't really know what his status is going to look like. But we know Lance Leipold and this offensive staff does a great job of coming up with game plans. This is going to be an awesome kind of game to see those offensive minds versus the Brent Venables defense. I am looking forward to that. I think this is going to be a really good test to kind of see where Oklahoma is right now, because they have the giant win against Texas. I think Texas is the best one-loss team in the country. That is a playoff caliber team right now. I'm looking forward to that rematch in the conference championships. We're going to talk about Texas a little bit in their QB situation, but this is going to be a really interesting test. What does Oklahoma look like when you're challenged in kind of all assets of the defensive games? I don't have a bet just for this yet. I'm leaning a little Kansas right now, but I still want to dig into some things. I still want to see what Daniels' status is going to be for the game. So that's going to be a game time decision. So make sure you're following the socials to go ahead and get that pick. All right. I think the game of the week, the thing we have to talk about is Oregon, Utah. Games at 3:30 in Austin Eckler Stadium. Out on the West Coast, it'll be a noon kickoff for them there. This is not a night game, which changes the dynamics of this handicap for me. We've talked about Utah extensively on the show. If you're a longtime listener, you know how much we love Utah, how much we love Kyle Whittingham. We think he's one of the best coaches in college football. He's really getting his roses this year, which I love to see. He's down his star quarterback. He's down his best offensive weapon most of this season in Kufi, the tight end. And yet they continue to roll because this is a Utah team that once you play them, you are generally worse off for playing them. They come and they bring the fight every single week. This is a tough out team, especially when you play them in Utah, out altitude, and one of the best home field advantages. But it is not a night game. And you're getting an Oregon team here that Dan Lanning, the one really good thing that he is, he's done a lot of good things. I shouldn't say the one really good thing, but one of the things he's done well at Oregon is he's sort of upped the toughness level, where in the past for a game like this, there's a fair argument that you could say Utah's just going to bully them here. They're just the more physical team. They're going to leave you bruised and battered, and they are going to, be a very physical test for Oregon here. But Oregon's up to the task. They have this kind of playing a phone booth style offense. It's a lot of short passes, death by 1,000 paper cuts, a solid run game, good offensive line. Bo Nix has been really, really good this year. The narrative of him on the road is really being challenged this year. I think Oregon's the best team in the Pac-12. I know they lost to Washington. They ended up pushing that game, covering if you got the 3.5 at Washington. I do think Oregon, though, is the most well-rounded team in the Pac-12. I like the defense here. Utah has solidified their quarterback position, which is good, I think. They're going to have some opportunities here, but I question their ability to sustain offensive drives, especially if they're not going to be in rhythm because Oregon's holding onto the ball. They're sustaining these long-term drives. I do give the edge to Oregon here, and I am going to place my money with Oregon Ducks at -6.5. We're not being scared. We're going in and attacking this game right off the bat. I do think Bo Nix and this offense has enough. Franklin presents an interesting downfield threat for Utah to have to deal with here. I really like Utah, to hang tough in this game, but I think as the game wears on, Oregon's going to start to pull away a little bit here. They're going to get the cover at 6.5, I think. So I'm going to go ahead and lay my money with Oregon. BYU, Texas. I don't have a bet in this game, but I think it's important to talk about Texas real quick. Ewers goes down with another injury. There are going to be questions about his durability as far as an NFL prospect, but the best thing Texas has going for it, one of the best things that Texas has going for it, is they have fantastic depth at quarterback. In steps Malik Murphy, who is a very solid, I look at a lot of teams in the SEC and the Big Ten, and he'd be the starter for a lot of these teams. He looked really good in the spring game. It is just a spring game, but the benefit that he has going for him is he has got a great player and play caller in Steve Sarkisian. This is a man that does a great job of calling plays to highlight your best attributes, comes up with a really good game plan. He's going to put Malik in positions to succeed here. You've got Arch waiting in the wings as well. There's a lot of really good depth at the quarterback position. So they've got guys to get them through this period of time. BYU, I don't think is really going to test them here. Maybe there's a shaky waters at the beginning of the game. So if you wanted to bet like a first half, I can maybe see that as, Malik tries to get his feet under him. But this is a spot where I don't have to worry too much about Texas. They've got the depth at quarterback. This is the best one-loss team in the country, in my opinion. They've got talent all around. They can run the ball really, really well, which has been a very strong suit here for Texas. So yeah, I have no issues or kind of problems with them at this point in time. And if for whatever reason Murphy struggles, Arch will certainly be in the wings. But I don't think that that's going to be an issue. You're going to be able to run the ball with Brooks. You've got some good weapons in the passing game. You've got a good defense you can rely on here. BYU doesn't really pose a threat. They're in a pretty down year this year. So I do think Texas is going to roll here. We're going to talk about our rankings in a little bit, but I don't think anything is dire there. I think they can get through this stretch without Ewers and be just fine, is essentially what I'm trying to say and come away from this, just doing a very poor job of it. All right, let's move on to a game where I do have a bet. Duke, Louisville. This is an interesting game. I was shocked about Duke's strategy last week. I thought it was very interesting that Leonard played, because even if you lost to Florida State, there is a path to the ACC championship. And so I thought that they would hold back Riley Leonard, and make sure that he was healthy. They elected not to. He re-aggravated that injury. Now he tried to go back in the game. Mike Elko smartly said no. But now this is a spot where he could miss this game. And that puts in jeopardy that path to the ACC championship. And that's why I was pretty shocked. Without Riley Leonard, I do worry about their path here against Louisville. Louisville's coming off a bye here. Jeff Brom and this offensive staff are fantastic. We talked about them in the Notre Dame game and how that was a danger spot. It's at home, coming off a bye. They're going to have some nice wrinkles for a very good Duke defense and a very good passing defense in Duke. But I do give the edge here to Louisville. I have gone ahead and laid a wager with Louisville at 6. There's no hook currently in the market right now for this because of the jeopardy at quarterback. I don't like what this offense looks like without Riley Leonard. We've now seen that iteration a couple times here with the injury. I do think Louisville's defense, it's at home. You get the bump. I like them here in that spot coming off the bye for Jeff Brom to throw in some wrinkles and have a good game plan in place to beat this Duke team. Georgia, Florida, largest cocktail party in the world. Line is set at 14, over under 49.5. This is a very, very interesting game. Georgia is now without the best player in college football that is a non-quarterback in Brock Bowers for the remainder of the regular season. I think that they're in a pretty decent spot to weather that storm offensively. They have started to come around. Other pieces are starting to pick up the slack, I think, or will be able to pick up the slack. Carson Beck is really good. I think we don't talk about him enough as a really capable quarterback. He's sort of flying under the radar. A comparable guy that I think a lot, because they're 1 and 2 in the country, Michigan, JJ McCarthy. I think he's right on par with McCarthy. He can make all the throws you need to do there. He doesn't turn over the ball. This is a Georgia team that is going to put up some points here. I think both these defenses are a little worse than maybe people realize. They're very good. But I do think they're a little down compared to expectation or, the general thought out there. You can get moving on this Florida team. We saw that in the Kentucky game. Especially being able to run the ball. I think Georgia has a path to real success here offensively, even without Brock Bowers. The question really becomes, can Florida hang around in this game? And Graham Mertz, to his credit, has been pretty good. I think that's actually more of a credit to Billy Napier. Contrary to popular belief, Billy Napier is a hell of a football coach. Maybe he hasn't done the best job of acquiring talent and upping the ante at Florida thus far in his career, but he's done a really good job, I think, in season adjusting this offense to make it more lethal and more tailored to what they have. Graham Mertz is getting the ball now out of his hands very quickly. It's a very easily digestible offensive scheme for him. It's quick decision-making. It's shorter passes. And because of that, as long as Graham Mertz doesn't turn over the ball, there are some paths to success here because of the style of defense Kirby allows to elect. Kirby recruits the defensive side of the ball better than anybody in college football right now. And he knows that. And his defensive scheme reflects that. He does play with lighter boxes. He allows his linebackers to operate in space because he really trusts his defensive line to control that line of scrimmage. And while the defensive line has a lot of talent, it's certainly, out of the last couple of years, the iterations we've seen is down. And that's because you're missing an all-world beater in Jalen Carter. I mean, Jalen Carter last year, and you're seeing it in the NFL this year, was just so dominant. And I think that Florida is going to have some ability to be able to run the ball in between the guard and center in that interior part of Georgia's defense, because Kirby does elect to play with some lighter boxes. And then they're going to be able to attack the outside with those quick, shorter passes. And this is a spot where if Graham Mertz just can be a field general and not turn over the ball, I think Napier will have a good offensive game script here for them. A lot of time is going to tick off. I don't think Florida's going to win this game, but I think they have a path to success a little bit here. So I don't hate them at 14. I haven't done anything there. I think the under is more in play at 50 because of the play style and that kind of slow, methodical pace that Florida is going to play with. So I think that's sort of maybe a way to attack this game. I haven't done anything. I may make a wager on a side here, but I don't have it right now. It's in a neutral site, as always. Obviously, if you're unfamiliar with the game, they play this at a neutral site in Jacksonville at Camping World, close enough to Georgia, things like that. So that's sort of how we maybe see this game a little bit here. But Georgia's doing what Georgia does. They're getting better as the season goes on. They're still my number one ranked team in the country. But it's going to be an interesting adjustment. I think they'll be fine without Brock Bowers for the rest of the regular season. I think they'll handle it well. They've got some talent, contrary to popular belief there. But It's going to be an interesting game. Tennessee, Kentucky, lines at 3.5, over under 51.5. Kentucky coming off a bye. Look, they've got a workhorse at running back. They can run the ball. What they need to be able to do is pass the ball. And Leary has been, I think it's fair to say he's been struggling. Now, that may be due to some lingering injury issues. He had the surgery in the offseason, obviously. His shoulder's been a little banged up, but they've really got to develop a stronger pass game here to stay in this game. Now, they talked about in the bye how they really worked on that, and they had their number one offense go against their number one defense, good on good, to really try to practice that during their off time here. They get a Tennessee team that's reeling after a really tough loss to Alabama, where you come out, you play a great first half against Alabama, and then you just get your heart ripped out in the second half. Because it was really looking, after that first half, it was looking like Tennessee might compete with Georgia here for that side of the SEC, but tough game. You now are going to Lexington, Kentucky. Joe Milton has been Joe Milton. There are flashes where you could kind of see the talent that everybody's been talking about for years now. And then there's a lot of times where he becomes shaky. Tennessee, good defensive line here. I think Kentucky can kind of control this game here. They got to show better in the passing game. So if you believe the rumblings that they may play with, they're going to play a little bit more with pace. They're going to be a little bit more efficient in the passing game. I think Kentucky's in a pretty decent spot here. Don't want to say that too loud. But I think Kentucky could be in a pretty good spot. I think playing with pace is really going to be helpful here. You got to get going. It's in the Mark Stoops era, this is not a team that generally plays with pace. But they've talked about maybe upping the pace a little bit here. Hopefully that's not smoke and mirrors. I think it could do the offense well. I think it could help Leary get into a bit of a rhythm. And yeah, we'll see there. Ohio State, Wisconsin, lines at 14.5, over under 45.5. Man, Wisconsin is in a bad spot, but we knew that coming into the season. We talked about that coming into the season. We talked about the fact that, this is an offensive philosophy shift for a Wisconsin team that it doesn't have the guys yet to run that. Mordecai is no longer the starting quarterback there, though. So it does seem like the backup's a little bit more suited to this. But you're changing, blocking philosophies on the offensive line. You're changing your philosophy from an offensive standpoint and trying to spread it out more and be a more lethal passing game. And you just haven't gotten those type of guys in the building yet. You don't have your all-world defensive coordinator anymore. And the defense is still good, but it is not that elite unit like we've seen. But in comes an Ohio State team that, yes, has beaten Notre Dame and has beaten Penn State, but Kyle McCord is really struggling. I know people are wanting to be like, no, he's good, but the offense is a lot of screw it. Marvin Harrison Jr. is down there. They started to use Cade Stover a little bit more in the last few weeks. I think that's the real game changer, is getting Cade Stover involved more and more in the passing game could be the real kind of turn of the key lock, per se, to unlock this offense. I didn't say that beautifully there, but you get what I'm saying. That's the guy that I would really like to see them continue to get involved more and more week to week. I think he could really unlock something for this offense in using him in the pass game. I think he's one of the better tight ends in the country. I'd like to see that. But McCord comes out. He doesn't throw the most accurate ball. We see this team be able to march down the field, but when they get to the red zone, they really struggle because he does struggle to fit it in between those tight windows and throw a very accurate ball. And that's, I think, kind of what's going to happen here is I think Ohio State's going to move the ball relatively well against this Wisconsin team. But as they get to the red zone, as those windows shorten, they're going to be settling for a lot of field goals. And then I do not see a lot of success here for this Wisconsin offense. Jim Knowles on the defensive side of the football, I said it when Ohio State hired him, it was one of the best signings in college football. It was exactly what Ryan Day needed to go and do and get a defensive coordinator who was going to toughen up that defense that had been exposed in the years prior for being a little soft. And this defense is tough as nails. They play with an edge now, and you could see it on the field. Sure, they don't have the kind of elite pass rusher that we've seen the last couple of years in Young and Bosa, but they got some real good talent on the defensive line. The linebackers are starting to get better week in and week out. I think their play has elevated sort of each week here. The secondary is starting to firm itself up. There's not as many communication issues in the back end. This is a really, really, really good defense. We saw that in the Penn State game, even though there's a lot of really bad offense from the Penn State side of things. But I'm having a hard time seeing how Wisconsin is going to find success offensively. I see Ohio State having success, but, Wisconsin's not going to let up these big time scores. So you're going to drive the length of the field, probably settle for a lot of field goals. I think an under is probably in play. We've seen this number start to come down a little bit. You can get it 45.5 right now. I'd probably play that. I think that's a fair play. A game I don't feel like I need to break down a ton, but Oregon State, Arizona, lines at 3, over under 56.5. I am backing Oregon State here. Big time Oregon State backers here. Arizona is tough as nails. This is a damn good football team, flying under the radar. They finally popped, I think, for a lot of the public last week, but this is a really good football team. This is a tough out football team. This team has a lot of fight and is really frisky, and I love the way they play. But you are going up against an Oregon State team that is going to control the game through the run, tough as nails. DJ has been a little bit better the last couple of weeks. So I do kind of like Oregon State here. I think it's a tough game. It's got that Pac-12 after dark kind of vibes, which makes it a little dangerous for Oregon State. You can beat Oregon State through the air. You can attack their secondary there. But I do like Oregon State here. So, excuse me. Those are the plays that I've made so far. We'll maybe have some more bets out later this week. So make sure you're checking out our socials. We do have a new ranking. If you follow us on TikTok, you already know this ranking, but the College Football Trophy Kids top 10 ranking is as such. Georgia, Michigan stay 1 and 2. You could flip them either way. If you've been following us on social, you know my thoughts on this Michigan cheating scandal. It's not good. It's at first I was like, this doesn't move the needle, but the more and more we learn about this, the more and more something smells a rot. There are so many interesting layers to this, like why an outside firm was just investigating Michigan and seemingly hacked their computers, it looks like. Michigan's giving out plays to other teams and information to other teams to try to derail some teams they didn't want to see in the college football playoff. It's an absolutely crazy thing. Like, let's see where the dust settles on this one. Initially, when it came out, it was just their advanced scouting and trying to steal signs. I didn't think much of it. But the more and more we learn, we're like, oh, this is actually a little bit worse than I think we thought. So let's see where the dust settles. Let's see what the investigation entails. But they're still the number 2 team in my book in the country. There's a strong argument for them being number 1, but 1 and 2 I think is fair. Oklahoma, Washington, Florida State stay at 3, 4, and 5. These margins are super thin right now. The reason I haven't ranked this way, Oklahoma moved to 3 after they beat Texas. I think, once again, I've said it on this show, Texas is the best one-loss football team in the country right now, I believe. That's a great win. This is a team that plays good defense, good offense. You've got a veteran presence in Gabriel Dillon at quarterback, a steady hand who can pose a threat in both the pass and run game. So I like that team right there. You've got Washington, who beats an Oregon team that is fantastic in a playoff-like game. That game we watched against Washington, Oregon was a playoff caliber game. Oregon's the best team in the Pac-12, which is the best conference, I would argue, in college football right now. So Washington moves to 4. Those 2 teams are probably going to see each other again in the Pac-12 championship game. So that will sort itself out. Florida State is a fantastic football team. They've played some really good teams, but unlike the other 2 who have beaten a playoff caliber team, Florida State doesn't have that win. They have some really good wins, but that's why they're at 5 right now. But that's a super thin margin. That's a really good football team that's playing it's gearing each week up better and better. I really like what Mike Norvell has done at Florida State. It'll suit itself out. Ohio State jumps up one place to 6th. I still don't think this is a very good overall football team because of the offensive limitations. I think Michigan is beating both Ohio State and Penn State. That's why they're already placed at 6. I've already factored it in. I don't think they're going to win that game. If they do, you've proved me right. They'll shoot right up to the top, but they haven't done that. They're at 6. Texas is at 7. Oregon is at 8. Excuse me. Alabama is at 9, and Penn State drops all the way to 10 in my ranking. The offensive deficiencies were on full display in that Ohio State game. The inability to have a vertical passing threat is a problem. James Franklin is who he is at this point. I think everybody has heard his struggles against the top 25. He's starting to remind me a lot of Mark Rich at Georgia. Early in the career, great success at Georgia, won 2 SEC championships. James Franklin does have 1 Big Ten championship under his belt. But he's starting to remind me a lot of him. His record through 10 seasons, 84-37. Mark Rich was 145-51 in 15 seasons. But it's kind of that idea that you're going to be a really good team. You're going to be nationally ranked year in and year out. Your name is going to be thrown around early in the season for that national championship hope, but you're never going to get over that hill. You're never going to get over the elite team in front of you. And that's sort of where Penn State is at. And if that's where they're at, great. But you're paying James Franklin $10 million a year. He's doing a good job recruiting. But he can't get over the hill when it comes to Michigan. He can't get over the hill when he comes to Ohio State. You've got some really good teams entering the conference next year. You're getting rid of divisions. So the 2 best teams are going to go. You already can't beat the 2 best teams in your conference. You've got some good schools coming in. The competition is going to get stiffer. So if you're okay with recruiting well, being a top tier team, but not being an elite team, James Franklin's your guy. But at this point, do you want to make a move at some point here and try to go get your version of Kirby Smart? A guy that you're in you're not in as talent rich of a state as Georgia, but you're in a pretty talent rich state in Pennsylvania. You've got some good football players there. You got some good recruiting pipelines. Getting a coach that can go and compete better with the Michigans and Ohio States of the world is an interesting question, but that's my top 10 right there. That's all we got for the college football show. Make sure to check out the NFL show. I will be back next week a little bit more prepared for this show. I do apologize. We didn't have more bets and more concrete information for you. It's just been a hectic week, but I wanted to get on here, give some thoughts, and go from there. And as always, peace.